This is Podco Media Networks.
It's the Innovation Podcast with Mark Reed Edwards and Garnett Harriman. Let's start the show.
Hi, it's Mark. On this episode of the iPod, Tyler Lorenzen, former college and pro football player, and now CEO and president of PURIS Proteins, which is focused on cultivating a regenerative food future with pea protein, grown and made in the USA with organic and non-GMO peas. It's one of the key ingredients in all the new meatless burgers and sausages we hear about. And as we found out when I talked to Tyler, the PURIS story is not an overnight success. It's a story of decades of perseverance against the odds in many ways. But Tyler can tell the story better than me in this first part of our discussion. Tyler, welcome to the iPod. It's great to have you here.
Mark, thank you for having me. And I'm glad to be on. I know you're calling in from the East Coast, and it's nice, beautiful time here in the Midwest as well.
Yeah, you're 1 hour behind me. It's about 8 o'clock here on the East Coast and 7 a.m., bright and early. Where are you? In Minnesota, right?
Yeah, I'm based in Minneapolis. I actually, after New Orleans, I moved from the heat of the deep south to the cool of the north. And it was interesting when I first moved up here, I did not love the fact that it was cold. And this gentleman named Eric Dayton, he was the son of the former governor here in Minneapolis, was giving a talk at this country club. And I was there invited by our marketing firm, and I was listening, and he said, you know what? I get so tired of people complaining that it's cold in Minnesota because it's supposed to be cold. And if it's not cold in Minnesota, we have serious problems.
Right.
He's like, so embrace the cold. Like, let's make Minnesota cold. And, you know, it really made me rethink the fact that, man, it is freezing here in the winter.
Yeah.
Summers are absolutely beautiful, but that's the way it was designed, and let's keep it that way.
Yeah, I grew up in Syracuse, New York. So since moving to Boston 30-something years ago, I feel like I haven't experienced winter. Even though it snows here, it's nothing like where I grew up. Exactly.
I went to UConn, and so I have a little bit of a bone to pick with you being a Syracuse guy. But all is good. I totally agree. I feel the same way with Connecticut thunderstorms. I was always like, this is just rains a lot. There's really no thunder.
Right. So can you tell me about your career path before we get into talking about PURIS? You went from pro football. You were on a team that won a Super Bowl, a great Super Bowl, by the way. And then you ended up CEO and president of PURIS. How did that all happen?
Well, for me, it started back when I was just a kid. I was born into the company, but the company has evolved significantly since I've known it. When I was a kid, I worked out in the fields, and I was a plant breeder, which means basically cross-pollinating plants. But my real passion was sports, athletics, basketball and football. And football is what I really hung on to and was able to excel at into college. I started off at Iowa State, transferred to a junior college in California called Palomar, where I was a quarterback, and then ended up at University of Connecticut playing QB there. And then, ironically enough, I found myself playing tight end in pro football for a couple years, and was lucky that I joined the New Orleans Saints at the right time. And Mr. Drew Brees and the rest of the squad led us to a Super Bowl, and that was a crazy time. And then NFL is, you know, the classic acronym that I always say is not for long. And my dad always told, and it's funny, but it's reality with sports. They're finite. And my dad always said, he's like, you know, while you have the time to play the sport, give it everything you have, because someday it'll be gone and you'll never, ever get to do it again. And you'll have to move on. So that's kind of the way I played it. And once I knew it was over, I made a clean break and came back, and the plant breeding company that I worked for when I was a kid had really transformed into an interesting business that had some strong tailwinds. One of the things my dad believed in when he started the company was non-GMO, organic, plant-based. And all of those tailwinds were supported by at the time. And so he wanted me to help him find a plant facility to make plant-based proteins, so a production plant. And long story short, I started helping him with plans to either get into coaching or move out to New York. And pretty soon, help started to become a project. The project's turned into my baby, and 8 years later, we've about 5x the company, and we're continuing to grow.
There's something about timing there, isn't there? That you're hitting this wave of people wanting to eat more healthful foods and plant-based diets, and you're filling that need for a lot of people.
It's really bizarre because this is what I've heard my whole life from my dad, that someday it'll matter, where your food comes from, how it's made, its nutrition purpose for people and planet, and people will really care. So we need to build a system that feeds into that. And I tell you, for many years of this crazy entrepreneur's vision, that prediction was not true. And he was ahead of the curve. It was odd. It was rare. It doesn't matter. Non-GMO, GMO, who cares? But then things started to change. And when that shift started to occur, it was certainly the early adopters or the innovators. And now it's hitting, mainstream. That early majority is really looking at what is possible with my nutrition. How can I have more longevity in my life? What is the impact of the decisions I make commercially? And how does that affect the world that I'm leaving or living in?
Yeah.
It's been kind of incredible. I didn't, even as little as 5 years ago, the momentum in plant-based is not as strong as it is today. It's very exciting times. And I think the main driver is companies like PURIS and brands that we work with are making foods that actually taste good and that just happen to be healthy, just happen to be sustainable for the earth. But in the end, they taste good and people want to eat them. That's the critical path for this. And ultimately it's food.
And really, it has been only in the last couple of years where I would go and buy veggie burgers. I've been doing it for 20 years. And you kind of accept that they're not going to taste quite as good as you would hope. But now that has really changed in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, where there are amazing products on the market. And that's something you're helping those companies with.
Yeah. I mean, as PURIS, we, as a plant protein manufacturer and really innovator in the entire supply chain, we get hit with a whole slew of new innovations from some of the leading edge companies and some startups or some major CPG. What's mind blowing is trying those products out and seeing what's coming. I mean, the future of plant-based is very strong. There is an incredible amount of intellectual property and commitment of capital to create this food future that people want, that's powered by plants. And it's exciting to see it roll out to the public market. I think just recently, actually yesterday, Beyond Meat announced a partnership with Dunkin' Donuts with the breakfast sausage.
Yeah.
Just simple things, making it easier to make the plant-based choice or make the sustainable choice. And I've had these sausages and I've been waiting for them to come out in the US, and sure enough, they finally did. And they're really good. So definitely go get yourself one.
Yeah, I've tried the Beyond Meat, the Beyond Burger, and the Beyond Sausage, and it's incredible. Especially the sausage is just amazing.
Yeah, and I think is remarkable with those guys is, I saw them early on down in Columbia, Missouri, in the small manufacturing plant, pure startup, and Ethan and the team were just so committed to making this happen, and the evolution that they've gone through is amazing. And then obviously with their great success on their IPO and all the buzz that they're creating for the industry, they're true pioneers and deserve a lot of credit for being strong enough and even stubborn enough to keep leading the industry, because someone's has to be that forthright and that certain that this is the right move. And I'm proud of Beyond Me of what they've done.
So let's focus on PURIS. Tell me about the company and what the mission is, and maybe a little story about how your dad founded it and when it was founded.
So PURIS, most people know us as a plant-based protein ingredient company, but really what are we? We're a seed company. So my dad's a plant breeder. We sell seed to farmers. We work with a whole bunch of farmers across the United States, and they grow non-GMO and organic peas or soybeans for us. And these are legumes, so they're nitrogen fixating. They take, nitrogen from the air, convert it to usable fertilizer for itself and next plant, which is good. It builds soil health. And so this is a tool for farmers to use to, reclaim their farm, to have a more rotational crops, a more diversity on a per acre basis. And then everything they grow, we buy back. So if they grow peas for us, we then have a contract to say, hey, Mr. Farmer, we'll also buy those back from you.
Yeah.
And then that's the point where we're providing the market. And that's one of the big sticking points is, growing with regenerative agriculture. A big buzzword in the industry is, it sounds good, but if there's not a place to sell it, the system's broken. So there has to be a value add every transaction. So the next step of our process is we then make ingredients out of it. So we take those peas and so peas are protein, starch, and fiber. And we're, like I said, most people know us as a protein ingredient company, but there's other things. So we use mechanical separation to ultimately take a pea and transform it into an ingredient that's usable in food. And in the end, we sell non-GMO and organic ingredients to major brands that sell plant-based food, or maybe some that sell products that aren't just plant-based. So we work with the whole consumer packaged good industry and really designing foods and trying to create new products, but also working in the behind the scenes as the engine behind a lot of the movement in the plant-based industry. And really, when you think about our mission, it's trying to rally all the stakeholders of that system. So the growers, the food manufacturers, the food makers, the brands, and then also the food eaters to deliver that ridiculously good tasting plant-based food experience. If we can do that, it makes the sustainable choice the easy choice, and people will choose plants, will choose things that give back more than they take, because it's a system built on a foundation of goodness that is supporting the soil, supporting the farmers, supporting the markets, supporting the food manufacturers, and a value exchange that's positive. So that's really the mission. And my dad started it. He was a trained plant breeder, was going to go into the seed industry, which, typically seed companies simply sell seed. They don't buy it back. And he said, you know what, I think there's a better system that we could start breeding plants for feeding humans. And it's going to take a whole system approach, but you have to start somewhere. So 35 years ago, he quit his job and started up a company with no money. And he had 2 little kids on the way. And I was one of them. My older sister, she was more brilliant than I was and had to work more than I was. But we grew up in a family business that worked a lot. And my mom and dad, kudos to them and hats off, because what they set out to do back then now is, a leading edge plant-based protein company, not just in the US, but globally. And, we have a joint venture with Cargill. Yeah. So Cargill is, the juggernaut food ingredient company globally. They're also very large in animal protein. And it's interesting because, one would say, well, why partner with them? They're so big or they're not necessarily mission aligned. And what you learn is, yes, they are. I mean, they were really committed on finding ways to build sustainable food. And they also have the capital to help make it happen.
Right.
And that's part of this business is super capital intensive. And it's been an interesting ride for me, certainly coming from pro football to starting up a plant-based ingredient business. Well, we've learned fast and we've survived the ups and the downs and created a great team to do it with. And it's in the end, that's what matters.
Next time, Tyler will tell us more about the peas they grow, how PURIS's regenerative approach to agriculture helps the environment, plus we take a glimpse into the future. Coming up in the weeks ahead, we have Ryan Merkley of Creative Commons, Jonathan Webb of App Harvest, Lauren Conaway of Innovate Her KC, and Tommy Williams of Tommy's Superfoods. Lots more on the way too. But next time, part 2 with Tyler Lorenzen. See you then.
Thanks for joining Garnett and Mark on the Innovation Podcast. Visit theinnovationpodcast.co to subscribe and listen to other episodes.